Welcome to UBI Unplugged, breaking down the future of income. I'm excited to dive into today's topic, universal basic income and the future of creative AI tools. How can UBI foster artistic expression and income generation with AI? And what are the ethical concerns and regulations we need to consider?
UBI, huh? Feels like we're always talking about UBI. I'm still not convinced it's a workable solution. It sounds great in theory, but the devil's always in the details, right? Especially when you throw AI into the mix.
Right, well, that's why we need to be critical. I'm cautiously optimistic about UBI's potential, especially with AI tools making it easier for people to generate income. But there are definitely challenges we need to address head-on, from funding to implementation to the impact on the labor market, and now the creative space.
Exactly. And that's where the AI piece comes in. Think about it. AI tools are already democratizing creative processes. Someone with no formal training can create stunning visuals, write compelling copy, even compose music, all with the help of AI. But what happens when those tools become even more powerful? What happens when everyone can create everything? That's where UBI could provide a safety net and a platform for exploration.
Okay, but everyone creating everything, that sounds like a nightmare. What's the value of art then? If anyone can just churn out a masterpiece with an AI, what's the point of being a real artist? It devalues the skill, the training, the passion, everything.
That's a valid concern, and it's something we need to think about. But I think it's also important to remember that AI is a tool. It's not going to replace human creativity entirely. It might augment it, change it, but it won't eliminate the need for human expression. And UBI could give artists the space to experiment with these new tools without the pressure of having to immediately monetize everything they create.
Yes, and think of the possibilities. Someone stuck in a dead-end job could use AI tools to develop a creative side hustle, supplementing their income with art, music, or writing. UBI could provide the initial financial stability to take that leap, to learn those tools, and to experiment. It's about unlocking potential that's currently being stifled by economic necessity.
Okay, side hustle maybe. But what about copyright? If an AI creates something, who owns it? The user. The developer of the AI. That's a legal minefield waiting to happen. And if everyone's creating AI-generated content, how do you even stand out? It'll be an ocean of sameness.
Copyright is absolutely a critical issue. We need clear regulations on the ownership of AI-generated content. And you're right, discoverability is going to be a challenge. But I think we'll also see new forms of creativity emerge, things we can't even imagine right now. Think about the early days of the internet. People were worried about the same things, that everything would be noise, that there would be no way to find anything worthwhile. But new platforms and communities emerged to curate and filter content.
Exactly. And UBI could actually help foster those communities. Imagine small groups of artists and AI developers collaborating, experimenting, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. UBI could provide the seed money for those kinds of projects, allowing them to take risks and explore new ideas without the pressure of immediate profit.
Okay, but where does the money for UBI come from? That's always the sticking point. You can't just print money that leads to inflation. So, are we talking about massive tax increases? Because that's not exactly going to encourage creativity either, especially among the people who are already successful and might fund some of these ventures you're talking about.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are several funding models being proposed, from progressive taxation to a wealth tax to even redirecting existing welfare programs. And yes, there are trade-offs to each approach. But I think it's important to remember that the current system isn't working for everyone. We have a huge and growing wealth gap, and traditional safety nets are failing to catch people who are being displaced by automation and globalization. So we need to be willing to explore alternative solutions, even if they're not perfect.
And let's not forget the potential economic benefits of UBI. When people have a basic level of income security, they are more likely to invest in their education, start businesses, and participate in their communities. That can lead to increased economic activity and innovation, which could ultimately offset some of the costs of UBI.
That's a big could, though. And what about the disincentive to work? If people are getting free money, why would they bother working? Who's going to do the less desirable jobs? Are we just going to automate everything and create a society of leisure? Sounds nice, but I don't think it's realistic.
That's a common concern, and the evidence is mixed. Some studies have shown that UBI has a minimal impact on work participation, while others have found a slight decrease. But even if there is a small reduction in the workforce, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are becoming lazy. It could mean that they're using their time to pursue education, care for family members, or start their own businesses. things that contribute to society in other ways.
Exactly. And think about the types of jobs that are most likely to be automated in the near future, repetitive, low-skill tasks. UBI could provide a cushion for people who are displaced by automation, allowing them to retrain and find new opportunities. It's not about creating a society of leisure. It's about creating a society where people have the freedom to pursue meaningful work.
Meaningful work? Easier said than done. Not everyone is cut out to be an artist or an entrepreneur. Some people just want a stable job with a decent paycheck. And UBI isn't going to magically create those jobs. In fact, it might make them harder to find if businesses have to pay higher taxes to fund the program.
True. And that's why UBI needs to be part of a broader strategy that includes job training, education reform, and policies that support small businesses and entrepreneurship. It's not a silver bullet. It's one piece of the puzzle.
Yes, and regarding the Trump voters and their frustrations, I think that a segment of that population shifted towards Trump to try to address economic struggles. And now they feel betrayed, right? Because his policies haven't really delivered. The frustration is real. UBI could be a more direct and efficient way to tackle the underlying economic issues rather than relying on, ad hoc interventions.
That's a big assumption, though. Assuming that UBI would have prevented that whole situation with the Trump voters, it just feels like you're rewriting history a little bit to fit the narrative.
No, it's not rewriting history. It's looking at underlying causes. If people are feeling economically insecure, they're going to be more susceptible to populist appeals. So the idea is that a UBI might address that insecurity and make people less vulnerable to those kinds of promises.
Exactly. And what about the potential impact of immigration policies on the economy? The recent reports of immigration enforcement practices and potential suspension of habeas corpus that could create a lot of fear and instability, harming local economies and small businesses. UBI could provide a safety net for vulnerable populations in those situations.
Okay, but are we really going to give free money to people who are here illegally? That's going to be a tough sell to a lot of people. I mean, there are people who are struggling and working their butts off, and now you're going to give money to people who are, in their eyes, not contributing to society.
That's a complex issue, and there are different opinions on it. Some argue that UBI should be universal, regardless of immigration status, because everyone deserves a basic level of economic security. Others argue that it should be limited to citizens and legal residents. There are practical and ethical considerations on both sides.
But regardless of where you stand on that particular issue, I think we can all agree that economic instability and fear are bad for everyone. And UBI could help to mitigate those problems, even if it's not a perfect solution.
Okay, let's bring it back to the AI part. What happens when AI gets really good at creating art? Like indistinguishable from human-created art? Will there even be a market for human artists anymore?
That's a scary thought, but I think there will always be a value placed on human creativity and authenticity. People connect with art on an emotional level, and I think that connection will still be important, even if AI can create technically perfect art.
And think about the potential for collaboration between humans and AI. Artists could use AI as a tool to explore new ideas, to experiment with different styles, and to overcome creative blocks. It's not about replacing human artists, it's about augmenting their abilities.
But what if AI can do it all? What if it can create art that's not only technically perfect, but also emotionally resonant? What if it can understand human emotions better than we do ourselves and create art that speaks directly to our deepest desires and fears?
That's getting into some pretty dystopian territory. But even in that scenario, I think there would still be a need for human connection and meaning. Art is not just about aesthetics, it's about communication, expression, and shared experience. And those things are inherently human.
Right. And UBI could give people the freedom to explore those connections, to create art that's not driven by profit, but by a genuine desire to express themselves and connect with others. It could lead to a flourishing of creativity that we can't even imagine right now.
Okay, so let's say UBI becomes a reality. How do we prevent it from being abused? How do we make sure that it actually goes to the people who need it and not to scammers and fraudsters?
That's a very important question. We need strong oversight and accountability mechanisms to prevent fraud and abuse. We also need to make sure that the program is designed in a way that's easy for people to access and understand.
And technology can help with that. Blockchain technology, for example, could be used to create a transparent and secure system for distributing UBI, and AI could be used to detect and prevent fraud.
AI fighting AI sounds like a sci-fi movie, but seriously, I'm still worried about the unintended consequences of UBI. What if it leads to inflation? What if it discourages people from working? What if it creates a dependency on the government?
Those are all valid concerns, and we need to address them through careful policy design and evaluation. We can't just implement UBI and hope for the best. We need to constantly monitor its impact and make adjustments as needed.
And we need to be willing to experiment. Our UBI is not a one-size-fits-all solution. We need to try different models and see what works best in different communities. Some cities and countries are already experimenting with UBI programs, and we can learn a lot from their experiences.
Speaking of which, what are some examples of places that have tried UBI and what were the results? I need some hard data to be convinced.
There have been several UBI experiments around the world, with varying degrees of success. Finland conducted a limited UBI trial that didn't show significant impacts on employment but did improve well-being. Stockton, California had a UBI pilot that showed positive impacts on employment, financial stability, and mental health. There's also the Minkum experiment in Canada in the 1970s, which had some positive results, but was ultimately shut down due to political reasons. The results are mixed, and more research is needed, but these experiments offer valuable insights into the potential and challenges of UBI.
And many of these were done before the rise of readily available and powerful AI tools. The landscape has changed significantly. Think of the potential of combining UBI with access to platforms like Midjourney for image creation, or tools that can generate marketing copy. Suddenly, just someone with minimal resources has the ability to start a micro business or generate income streams they simply couldn't before.
Micro businesses, okay, but what about the bigger picture? How does UBI affect the overall economy? Does it stimulate growth, or does it stifle it?
That's another area where the research is still ongoing. Some economists argue that UBI could stimulate demand and lead to economic growth by putting more money in the hands of consumers. Others worry that it could lead to inflation and reduce the incentive to work, which could hurt the economy in the long run. The impact will depend on how UBI is designed and implemented, as well as the overall economic context.
Right, and the design is crucial. A well-designed UBI program could be a powerful tool for promoting economic stability, reducing poverty, and fostering creativity and innovation. But a poorly designed program could have unintended consequences and undermine its own goals. That's why it's so important to have these kinds of conversations, to explore the potential benefits and challenges of UBI, and to develop policies that are both effective and equitable.
So we're basically saying it could work if we do everything right? That's not exactly a ringing endorsement.
It's a cautious endorsement. I think UBI has the potential to be a valuable tool, but it's not a magic bullet. It requires careful planning, ongoing evaluation, and a willingness to adapt as we learn more. But the potential benefits are significant enough to warrant serious consideration.
Yes, and as AI tools become more powerful and pervasive, the need for a safety net like UBI will only grow. We need to start thinking now about how to create a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their skills or background. A future that includes both economic security and the freedom to create.
All right. You haven't completely convinced me, but you've given me something to think about. I still have a lot of questions and concerns, but I'm willing to keep an open mind.
That's all we can ask for. The future is uncertain, but the conversation needs to keep happening. Thank you for listening to our views on UBI and creative AI tools. We hope this discussion has given you some new things to consider as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on UBI Unplugged. Until next time, keep thinking critically about the future of income.